Thank you. I understand. Sure. I know I emailed it this afternoon. And I, unless you give me another one. Thank you. All right. Thank you.
Hey, Brenda, how you doing? Yeah, a little bit. Get out there. I like your mask, champion. Yeah. Yeah, you will be. Oh, is it? Oh, really? Well, it's better than the other way. Yeah. Awesome. Good. It's working. Good. Great.
Call to order Kent County Levy Court business meeting, Kent County Administrative Complex, 555 Bay Road, Dover, Tuesday, October 27th, 2020. Levy Court Chamber, room 203 at 7 p.m. sharp. Mr. Pedomage.
Thank you, Mr. President. Before we begin the Levy Court business meeting this evening, just a few brief comments about the proceeding. This is a meeting that's being conducted in the Levy Court chambers at 555 Bay Road. We're also joined on the teleconference line by participants in the meeting, and we will be managing their participation throughout the meeting at appropriate times. If members of the public who happen to be joining us remotely over the conference line wish to speak on a particular item, we will instruct you at that time how to raise your electronic hand by pressing *1 on your phone, and we'll be able to unmute you and have you join the meeting. And for that purpose, since we do have remote visitors to the meeting, we ask that folks that are speaking, please state your name for the record so that everyone knows who's speaking. And when you're concluded with your comments, please indicate that you're through with your comments. As an official proceeding in the Levy Court, this meeting is being recorded. There will be official minutes prepared and adopted by Levy Court at a future date. All rules of procedure adopted by Levy Court are in effect for this meeting, including the Mason's Rules of Order, and those are the rules of order that we will follow for tonight's proceeding. Mr. President, I'll turn the floor back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Petimage. Tonight we'll have the invocation by Mr. Hall. Pledge allegiance to our flag, Mr. Angel. Moment of silence for our troops, Mr. Sweeney. All rise.
Heavenly Father, we recognize your presence here tonight. We ask that in your wisdom you guide us in all these proceedings. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please remain standing for a moment of silence to honor our military members, law enforcement officers, firefighters, paramedics, and other first responders who have lost their lives in the line of duty, protecting and fighting for our freedoms. We also honor those law enforcement, firefighters, EMTs, nurses, and doctors who have succumbed to COVID-19 virus complications contracted through close interaction with infected patients, losing their lives caring for others. Air Force Sergeant Ronald Ouellette from Merrimack, New Hampshire. Air Force Senior Airman Jason Kai Fan from Anaheim, California. Detective Kevin Dwayne Collins from Pine Bluff Police Department in Arkansas. Detective Kurt Holland, Commerce City Police Department, Colorado. Investigated Lemuel Delray Bruce from the Houston Fire Marshal's Office in Texas, shot and killed by a suspect inspecting a fire. Sergeant Harry Cohen, Riverside County Sheriff's Department, California. Sergeant Conley Jumper, Greenville County Sheriff's Office, South Carolina. Sergeant Harry L. Preston, Houston PD, Texas. Corporal Adam McMillan, Hamilton County Sheriff's Office, Ohio. Firefighter Edward Gary Minnick from the Colmar Volunteer Fire Company in Levittown, PA. Firefighter Jason Cortez from San Francisco Fire Department No. 3 in California. And Captain Keith O'Brien Williams from the Camilla Fire Department in Georgia. Please keep these firefighters and law enforcement in your thoughts and prayers tonight, and all their families who have lost members and are missing them as we head into the holidays for the end of the year. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. We need a roll call to determine a quorum. Ms. Tanaka.
Mr. Angel?
Present.
Mr. Buxton?
Present.
Mr. Hall?
Present.
Mr. Howell? Absent. Mr. Pepper?
Here.
Mr. Sweeney?
Here.
Mr. Banta?
Present.
Mr. President, roll call reveals 6 present, 1 absent.
Thank you, Lori. 6 commissioners present. We do have a quorum. Need a motion on consent agenda 20-11.
Mr. President.
Motion to approve, Mr. President.
Second.
Adoption of the agenda.
Is that in written form?
Mr. President.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but We had an item of correspondence that may affect the agenda before you adopt it. Okay.
Well, before we adopt the agenda, we did receive a communication earlier yesterday. In fact, it may have been this morning, but it may have been yesterday for sure. Anyway, it says, on behalf of an applicant, Steve Barton of Ching LLC, Panoni Associates, Inc., is submitting this request to table this application for being heard at tonight's Levy Court meeting. The applicant has only recently received the Regional Planning Commission recommendation and has learned of a recent correspondence sent by DelDOT to property owners within the vicinity of this project, clarifying statements made by the opposition to this rezoning application. The applicant respectfully requests this application be tabled until next month's Levy Court hearing on November 24th to allow for additional time to review these documents and to prepare for the hearing. The applicant understands that this request will incur a $100 re-advertisement and posting fee, which shall be paid prior to the next hearing. That's the communication we received today.
Mr. President, if I may, just for the Commissioner's edification, under our ordinances, because of the lateness of its arrival within 24 hours, only the Levy Court can change the agenda at this point. If you so move or choose to honor that request, you would have to pass a motion to strike that item from the agenda and postpone it. Otherwise, it would go the other way.
Mr. Buxton.
Mr. President, I'd like an opportunity to weigh in on the request, since I'm the Planning Commission Chair as well as the representative for that district. Although I recognize there's merit to the request, I also recognize it was exceptionally late, and due to the fairness of the individuals who showed up expecting a hearing, it may be in fact that at some point in time we recommend a tabling, but I do not believe we should put off the opportunity for some individuals to hear and in fact possibly make public comment. So.
Thank you, Mr. Buxton. We concur with your findings. So with that being said, we need a motion to adopt the agenda as you see in printed form in front of you.
Motion to approve, Mr. President.
Second.
Regularly moved and seconded. Mr. Pepper, Mr. Sweeney, to adopt the agenda you have in front of you. Any questions on that motion? Hearing none.
Mr.
Naka.
President, I have a
So,
question. I'd like to move to strike the inspections and plan review RFP and discuss that separately.
we're not to that part of the agenda yet. We're going to get to consent agenda in a minute. We're doing.
All right.
All
All right, sorry.
So the motion on the agenda? We're done with that? Okay.
Roll call.
Roll call, please, Lori.
Mr. Angel?
Yes.
Mr. Buxton?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Howell? Absent. Mr. Pepper?
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney?
Yes.
Mr. Banta?
Yes.
Mr. President, roll call reveals 6 yeas, 1 absent.
Thank you, Lori. 6 affirmative votes approves the agenda as you have it in written form. Next consent agenda 20-11. Mr. Hall.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to strike the inspections and plan review from the consent agenda and discuss that separately this evening.
So if we strike that item, inspections and plan review, we'll put that under Mr. Buxton. That'll be after Mr. Sweeney on the last page, item number 1, under Mr. Buxton, inspection and plan review. Okay?
Thank you, Mr. President.
With that being said, we still need a motion on the rest of the balance of the consent agenda 20-11.
Move to approve the amended consent agenda 20-11.
Second.
Moved and seconded, Mr. Sweeney, Mr. Angel, to approve the balance.
Prior to moving on, certainly respect Mr. Hall. Certainly support any commissioner pulling something from consent agenda. What I do not support is not at least giving me a courtesy call as the chairman of that department and discussing it with me. I think that that's something that's important to this court to maintain communication. With that said, call the vote.
Well, Mr. Buxton, before you leave, I think it should be noted that I had advised Mr. Hall to notify Mr. Buxton as well as Mr. Pepper, and I don't know if you did that or not.
No, Mr. President, I didn't see any correspondence about that, so.
Well, the correspondence I got indicated you were going to speak to Mr. Pepper, but
Yes.
Mr. President, I did receive an email from Mr. Hall.
okay, fine. Okay, with that being said, we'll need approved consent agenda, absent inspections and plan review RFP.
Go ahead, Lori.
We need consent agenda 20/11.
Well, I did the motion.
it was
Mr. Angel seconded.
Move for a vote then.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Angel?
Yes.
Mr. Buxton?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Howell, absent. Mr. Pepper?
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney?
Yes.
Mr. Banta?
Yes.
Mr. President, roll call reveals 6 yeas, 1 absent.
Thank you, Lori. 6 affirmative votes approves the amended consent agenda 20/11. Next item on the agenda, presentations, Employee of the Month 2020.
Just 1 second.
Kent County Department heads have selected Caitlin M. Scheck from the Department of Community Services. as
Ms.
the
Tanaka, can
November-
you pull the microphone closer to your mouth? Thanks.
Mr. Tanaka, I think we learned at leadership that the president tonight, is that correct, Mr. Pettimaj?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. I can't.
Employee of the Month now, right?
Right.
Correct. Okay, we're good.
Right. Kent County Department heads have selected Caitlin M. Scheck from the Department of Community Services as the November 2020 Employee of the Month. Caitlin serves as a Recreation Program Supervisor 1 in the Parks and Recreation Division and has worked for Kent County since September 2017. Her primary duties include organizing and coordinating recreational programs and leagues at the Recreation Center, various county parks, and other locations. Caitlin is responsible for greatly expanding Kent County Parks and Recreation's youth soccer program by leading efforts to combine youth recreational players from a local club and those enrolling in Kent County's recreation program. Earlier this year, this combination of programs resulted in 175 signups for spring soccer. Unfortunately, it was cut short 1 week into the season by the COVID-19 pandemic. Working through the summer, Caitlin was able to coordinate a safe return for fall soccer, which currently has 130 youth involved. Play has continued, and the vision of the Kent County Soccer League is taking shape. Caitlin works tirelessly, coordinating with uniform suppliers, volunteer coaches, local soccer resources, officials groups, park staff, and front office staff for registration purposes. According to Community Service Director Jeremy Shepard, Caitlin is a thoughtful worker with a powerful inner drive to make programs better. Her passion for youth soccer led the way for the program merger last spring and now to fruition in the fall. She successfully managed a detailed safe return plan for youth soccer, and the Kent County community is better for it. Congratulations, Caitlin, on a job well done. Caitlin resides in Commissioner Sweeney's and Pepper's districts. The tribute reads, Kent County Levy Court, November 2020, Employee of the Month, Caitlin M. Scheck. On this, the 27th day of October 2020, the Levy Court of Kent County, State of Delaware, does hereby recognize Caitlin M. Scheck, Recreation Program Supervisor 1, Department of Community Services, for her exceptional initiative, dedication, and conscientiousness in the delivery of services to the citizenry of the county.
Thank you, Lori. Kate, if you would come on down, and the county administrator will present you with your Employee of the Month certificate.
Vision that you've created for youth sports is wonderful, you're making a huge impact. Unfortunately, in the spring, we got a little derailed with what's happening, but it didn't deter you. And so this fall, we're launching into our first season. And it's all credit to the energy you brought to the job. So congratulations on this honor, it's well deserved. And if Mr. Shepherd wants to say a few words, and also the commissioner will certainly want to congratulate you as well. So Jeremy, I'll turn it over to you. I hope this is for you.
Yeah, I just want to say again, congratulations to Caitlin. She's been an excellent employee from the start. You know, a lot of drive, a lot of initiative, detail-orientated, and passionate in what she does. Obviously, soccer is a passion of her, but she doesn't stop there. She gives the opportunity for all different types of programs for all different types of county citizens. So this is an excellent employee, and we're very happy to have her. Thank you very much, Caitlin, for your service.
Congratulations, Caitlin, and I think Mr. Sweeney has a comment.
I do. Caitlin, was that your baby out there crying for you? Not much to take to quiet him down, is it? Just put him in mommy's arms. So people, I don't think they realize just how much of interaction that I have with you. I mean, other than your love of soccer and what you do for the county, your involvement in the fantasy trail from this past weekend was fantastic. That was a greatly successful event. But you are the one person in this state who can keep my wife in line and get her information submitted for the program on a regular basis. So congratulations on that. And for that fact alone, you deserve this honor. Congratulations.
Any other commissioner comments? Mr. Buxton.
Caitlin, Carson, Dad, and many folks can attest, you're going to miss that. So enjoy it, right? Even when they're out there screaming like that. Enjoy that ride, all right? Thanks, congratulations.
Let's give her a round of applause.
No, just thank you for this opportunity. I know it's troubled times right now, but you know, with the great guidance that we have working in community services, we were able to make it happen and give the community exactly what they need, and that's just something that they can do outside, safe, and get the kids happy again. So thank you guys.
Thank you so much. Yeah, Caitlin is right. COVID-19 plays tricks on you. Played tricks on my agenda this evening. I never make very many mistakes, but I made a few tonight, and thanks to Mr. Sweeney and Mr. Buxton and Mr. Pepper and the gang, we're going to get through it. So appreciate that. We have introductions. I think there are 5. Mr. Coelho.
Thank you, President Banta. We do have at least one of the new employees unable to be here tonight. Hard to tell with masks if they all show or not. First up is the first 3 or 4 will be introduced by Director of Public Works, Diana Galt. Diana?
So we have several introductions tonight, and so that I'm going to introduce them, ask the person to start walking up as I introduce them, and then I'll step aside and let them speak a few words. So tonight, Eric Wharton is with us. He was hired on September 1st of 2020. He is a new electrician's helper 1 at the Wastewater Facilities Division. He was employed at Resurrected Electric as a journeyman electrician. Prior to that, he was an apprentice electrician at Alpha Wave Power Connections. He is certified in electrical technology and obtained his electrical apprenticeship from the state of Delaware. Eric resides in Sussex County.
Right. I first want to start off by saying thank you to everybody involved for allowing me the opportunity to become a member of Kent County. I'm very excited to see what the future holds for not only myself, but also for the county. I also enjoy the fact that in my workplace, in my section that I'm working in, there's a wealth of knowledge there. I enjoy to learn, and I'm very excited to be able to learn from the gentleman that will be teaching me. So it's a pleasure to meet all of you. Again, I just want to say thank you, and I'm excited to see what the future holds.
Welcome aboard, Eric. I'm sure that you have a name of Eric. Maybe Eric Buxton might want to make a comment.
Your enthusiastic introduction. I appreciate you. You probably want to help him with some push-ups or something. Brooks is getting a little bit suspect. Thanks.
Appreciate you being here. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
You
gentlemen.
bet.
Next is John Miller. John was hired on September 14, 2020. He is a new GIS Technician 1 in the Engineering Division. Most recently, he was employed at Ascena Retail Group as an IT support specialist. Prior to that, John was employed at the shipyard as an IT intern. John resides in Newcastle County.
I just want to say I just moved here actually from Columbus, Ohio, not too long ago, just about 3 months. So I'm pretty new to Delaware, new to the East Coast, but I look forward to working here at the county, getting to know how things kind of work here. And yeah, thank you all for the kind of warm introduction.
Yeah, welcome aboard, John, and you got a good resume, so we appreciate you being here, and thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
You bet.
Next is Mr. Stephen Polson. Stephen was hired on September 28th as a wastewater plant operator trainee in the Wastewater Facilities Division. He was recently employed as a security officer with Allied Universal Security. Prior to that, Stephen was a bulk fuel specialist for the United States Marine Corps Reserves. Stephen is certified as an electromechanical technician for welding from Polytech Adult Education. Stephen resides in Commissioners Bandas and Peppers districts.
Evening, gentlemen. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to work for the county and provide for my family. This is a much better job than what I was recently working. Thank you for it.
Stephen, thank you for being here, and I will say this, once you live in the best district in the county, which is the first Levy Court district, so you made a couple good decisions. Work for the county, live in the first Levy Court district, so appreciate your time, and thank you for being here, okay? Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next, we have Michael Jones, who was hired on October 19th, 2020. He was hired as a wastewater facilities plant operator trainee in the Wastewater Facilities Division. He most recently served in the United States Army and was certified in vehicle maintenance. Michael is the recipient of several military awards, including the National Defense Service Medal and the Army Service Ribbon. Michael resides in Commissioner Buxton's and Peppers districts.
Just want to say thank you for this opportunity to serve for my community, and I look forward to putting my expertise to work. Thank you.
Welcome aboard, Michael, and I think Mr. Buxton or Mr. Pepper may have a comment or two. Go ahead.
Welcome, and what stands out is thank you. Thank you for your service to the country. Appreciate you.
Mr. Sweeney.
Thank you very much. Welcome aboard. Thank you for your service. Also like to extend the same honor to Mr. Polson. Thank him for his service. He walked out. Thank you.
Mr. Pepper, any comment?
Thank you.
On behalf of County Administrator Mike Padamaj, who's also the department head for the Administration Department, it's an honor for me to introduce the new Facilities Director, Sam Vasquez. Started with the county on October the 12th. He was most recently employed as a prospect at Prospect Inspection Services as an advisor, field tech, and inspector. Prior to that, Sam was Director of General Services for Peninsula United Methodist Homes Long-Term Care Facilities and the Senior Director of Maintenance at Genesis Healthcare. He attended classes at Del Tech and holds a HVAC certification. He resides in Commissioner Buxton's and Commissioner Peppers districts. Sam?
Good evening. I want to thank you, first of all, for the opportunity to serve the county here. The minute I walked in the building, I felt like part of the family. Each department as I tour, I'm just absolutely amazed at the longevity and the hospitality. This is a well-oiled machine. I'm just absolutely elated to be a part of that, certainly utilizing my expertise as we work along. I know I've got big shoes to fill, no doubt. And I'm confident that I'm going to be able to do that. Working along with Mike and Alan, the other department heads as well, achieving the goals that we set forth here. So I want to thank you for the opportunity here presented. I could go on, obviously, with a little bit of history about my family life and my experience. I would love the opportunity to do that with each of you one-to-one.
Sam, we appreciate you being on board, and you're in Commissioner Buxton's district, so I'm sure he may have a comment or two.
Sam, I'm going to put you on the spot. I'm not going to ask for a decision to be made at this moment. But I'm going to ask you to take a moment. You can have 10. Maybe get with Kelly, possibly Mike. Because in about 30 minutes, maybe 15, more and more people are going to continue to leave. And we've got five people that made the effort to come here tonight that would like to be inside this chamber. And so if there's a way to accommodate them after individuals leave, if we can have those folks safely move upstairs and take a seat in this facility, that would be wonderful. If it cannot happen, at least we took a look, so I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Sweeney.
Thank you, Sam. You've already stated that you will, right here, you've already stated that you've had big shoes to fill. So welcome to our Kent County family. The reason this building is in such good shape is because not only did your predecessor love this building, but we all love this building. So hopefully you'll feel the same way and keep it going the way it is. Appreciate your persistence and your recognition of that. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any other comments? Sam, I appreciate your time tonight. Thanks,
Thank you.
Sam. You bet.
Appreciate it.
So the next item on the agenda tonight are public hearings, petitions for conditional use approval. We'll let staff to get themselves organized, and we'll begin with the first public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, we'll start with a word about how the hearings will be conducted tonight. This public hearing is being conducted for the purpose of giving the citizens of the county the opportunity to present testimony on the applications before the Levy Court. Everyone will have an opportunity to speak. All statements are to be made from the podium at the front of the room. For the record, please give your name and address. Copies of any written statements or exhibits used during the hearing should be presented for identification and inclusion in the record. For each application before the Levy Court, the President will introduce the application. The Levy Court will then take testimony from all of those in favor. Testimony will then be received from those who may be opposed. After everyone has had an opportunity to speak, the hearing on the application will be closed, and the Levy Court will take what action it deems appropriate. Levy Court's decision will be based upon public hearing testimony given at this meeting and a recommendation submitted to the Levy Court by the Regional Planning Commission. I would ask that that recommendation be included by reference in the permanent record of this meeting established by the Clerk of the Peace. The public notice of this hearing was published in the October 9th, 2020 edition of the Delaware State News. The first application before the Levy Court is C-2008. It's a conditional use application for a school bus parking operation. It's located outside the growth zone, just over 4 acres, west of the intersection of Cedar Grove Church Road and Plummer Lane, west of the town of Felton. The Regional Planning Commission took testimony on this application at their October 1st hearing, and at their October 8th business meeting, voted unanimously to recommend conditional approval. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions for staff? Any questions for staff? Thank you, Ms. Keefer. The public hearing open on application C-20-08. Is there anyone here in favor? Anyone here in favor of application C-20-08? Got one?
Couple on the phone? Okay, I'm sorry. If caller ready to speak, press star one on your phone, and we could release you to speak. Seeing no callers online to speak, Mr. President, back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Pettibones. Is there anyone here in opposition of application C-20-08? Anyone here in opposition? Anyone here in opposition?
Same information to callers. If you wish to speak in opposition, press star one on your phone and we can release your mute. We're good.
Thank you, Mr. Pettibones. With that being said, Mr. Pepper, how about you taking the lead on making a motion? The public hearing is now closed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. I make a motion to approve application C-20-08, AR Agricultural Residential for school bus parking, 4.2 miles plus or minus acres west of the intersection of Cedar Grove Church Road and Plummer Lane, west of the town of Felton. Make a motion to approve.
Second motion.
Regular moved and seconded. Mr. Pepper and Mr. Sweeney to approve application C-20-08. Any questions on that motion? Hearing none. Ms. Tanaka, please call the roll.
Yes, based on RPC approval, no opposition, and staff approval.
Based on reasons stated.
Yes, based on staff and RPC recommendations.
Yes, based on all the previous reasons, plus obviously no opposition here tonight.
Yes, based on all stated reasons.
Based on recommendations of the Regional Planning Commission and the staff and no opposition this evening, I vote yes. Thank you, Lori. 6 affirmative votes approved application C-20-08. Next item for public hearing, ordinance LC-20-09. Ms. Kiefer.
Thank you, sir. Ordinance LC 20-09 is an application for rezoning and comprehensive plan map amendment. The site is currently identified for low-density residential. It's zoned AR. The proposal is to change it to highway commercial with a zoning of BG, or general business. It's located at the intersection of Route 1 and the Old Cemetery Road, just north of Milford, inside the growth zone. The Regional Planning Commission took testimony on the application at their October 1st hearing, and at their October 8th business meeting, voted unanimously to recommend denial of the application, citing the lack of compliance with the comprehensive plan and the fact that the area isn't within one of the master plan areas. So again, this comes with a recommendation for denial. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions for staff? Any questions for staff? Thank you, Ms. Kiefer. That being said, we'll open the public hearing. The public hearing is open. Ordinance LC 20-09. Is there anyone here in favor? Anyone here in favor of ordinance LC 20-09? Give us your name, address, and if you're not an attorney, be sworn or affirmed, please, and thank you.
Good morning, or good evening, Mr. President, and members of the Levy Court. My name is Richard Forston, an attorney with Saul Ewing. I live just south of the canal in Middletown.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. Is that better? Good evening, members of the Levy Court. My name is Richard Forston, attorney for the applicant, Ching LLC. Tonight with me is the principal of Ching, Mr. Steve Martin, and our project engineer, Greg Rochelle. The matter before you tonight, despite what others I think are going to say and present later, is a very, very small and discrete matter. We are here concerning the rezoning of 2 acres and 2 acres only, located on the western side of Route 1 and located in the growth zone. The property is bordered on the north by commercially zoned property. It's bordered on the south by commercially zoned property. Across on the eastern side of Route 1, outside the growth zone, is commercially zoned property. It's about 1.5 miles south of the infamous turf field complex. And that's about it. Commercial property to the north, commercial property to the south, commercial property to the east, fronting on Route 1, in an area that I believe, and I would submit, and our client believes, is impractical for long-term continued residential use. And so we are here tonight seeking a rezoning. Essentially, if you look at the map that's up, you'll see that, as I said, we're kind of a notch in the property zoning along Route 1 there. And so there's a mobile home on one of the parcels, and then there is a home on the other parcel, but long-term, with everything that's happening in that area, those I do not believe are sustainable uses. We're here tonight essentially to be made consistent with our neighbors to the north, south, and east. So we believe this is consistent with the rest of the zoning in the area. And I don't really think it's all that complex a case or matter for you. But having said that, I think you're going to hear a lot more. There was a lengthy presentation made to the RPC. There have been letters sent to the community, which DelDOT has said are false, and I'll read you some excerpts from those letters in a moment. There's all sorts of complaints. If you go back to the previous map, to the north of this property is a 20-acre commercially zoned site. There has been a plan being discussed for that parcel. It actually went to the plus process, and it shows a hotel, and it shows a Royal Farms type operation and some other uses. There's a lot going on in this area. There's a service road that is being discussed, which generally speaking, I think DelDOT likes the idea of service roads along Route 1. Route 1 is supposed to be limited access. None of that matters. None of that matters, and you shouldn't want to have your time wasted hearing about other properties in the area and how they might be developed or not developed. It just doesn't matter if there's a hotel planned for a neighboring property, even though the owner of a property at the turf complex might not want a hotel to complete with his hotel project. Whether there's going to be a service road or not is immaterial to the rezoning of this property. Whether there's going to be a Royal Farms or other uses up or down Route 1 along this stretch on these commercially zoned properties, it just doesn't matter. None of that matters for this rezoning for these 2 acres, which, as I say, is filling kind of a hole or a notch along Route 1, and I think it's misleading and a certain amount of fear-mongering to suggest otherwise. But don't take my word for that. One of the reasons that a continuance was requested is because DelDOT just yesterday sent a letter to neighbors in the area. There had been a letter sent to all the neighbors up and down this stretch of Route 1, alerting them to the service road, and they were going to lose access on Route 1, and there was going to be a parade of horribles. So this is the letter. I'm just going to read you excerpts rather than the whole thing because I'm respectful of folks' times. Yes.
Mr. President, Mr. Forson, and it's no fault of your own, it's the COVID world. Just every so often make sure that you get into that mic because there's folks on the line. Your testimony is important and I know they want to hear it.
All right.
So I'm not trying to, I know that this is awkward. So.
Well, I'm soft-spoken enough as it is, so I apologize. If folks are having trouble hearing me, just
fine.
Wave at me and I'll make sure to try to speak up.
We're fine, maybe the ones behind or the ones on the phone. But anyway, go ahead, thank you.
All right, thank you. So here's what DelDOT said in their just released letter, and we really wanted an opportunity to go talk to folks and go over this with them, because as I say, I think there's been a lot of misinformation put out there. So this is DelDOT writing. First, under the Ray description, Mr. Pardee, he's the one who sent the letter, calls it, quote, DelDOT's proposed service road, end quote. To be clear, DelDOT is not constructing a service road. Second, Mr. Pardee informs you that DelDOT intends to make the quote access road, end quote, and quote service road, end quote, improvements. This is not correct. The improvements will be made by the developer of the project, not this project, but a different project, at their cost and expense. Third, Mr. Pardee asserts that the improvements are being implemented to facilitate the development of a hotel, a Wawa convenience gas store, and several other uses on the Medding property, and also uses, this is south of the Medding property, but these uses fall into that. And DelDOT says, DelDOT does not know what tenants or uses will ultimately be made of the Medding property. However, the February 2020 TIS prepared on behalf of the developer does describe those proposed uses. It says the improvements are part of the South Frederica Master Plan for larger scale commercial development in this area. And then fourth, and this is perhaps I think what has caused people most alarm, it says fourth, Mr. Pardee states, if you have access to SR1 from your property, that access will be closed, and you will be required to gain access to the local roadway network via the proposed service road, i.e. you will be required to relocate any driveway access to your property so that it connects to the proposed service road. This is categorically false. That's what DelDOT says in this letter. This is categorically false. So, not surprisingly, people are concerned about what they may or may not be able to do with their property. And I don't blame people for getting upset, but DelDOT has said this is categorically false. And all of that is unrelated to these two particular acres that we're seeking this rezoning for tonight. Now, why are we seeking this rezoning? Well, it's to fill in that notch. Also, one of the plans that our client has longer term, if you look at that other kind of squarish property immediately west of these two parcels, there you go, thank you. That area is proposed for an RV park, a campground. It would be for vacationers, travelers, that sort of thing. And the idea is that for those folks on that campground, to have a convenience type store, a general store where they can get milk, where they can get the paper, where they can get a cup of coffee or a soda, eggs and whatnot to support the RV park. And then also a general offices for the RV park would be on that parcel as well. So all told, if you look at our concept plan for that site, it's about 7,000 square feet of office space, which doesn't generate that much traffic. I did see a PowerPoint presentation that says the project will generate over 16,000 trips per day. The problem is that's talking about all this other stuff to the north. You can lump in this little rezoning as part of that, but it is literally the tail wagging the dog when you do that. So I just want to be clear what we're here for. It's, in my view, very modest, and I'd like to think it's a no-brainer, except that my friends in the planning department recommended against it. And I want to go through their reasoning, obviously, because obviously that is important to you all. You're the ones who are ultimately making the decision. Their recommendations are just that. And they gave 4 reasons. But I think that they tend to look at the big picture, and they're not looking at just these 2 acres in the context of where they are on Route 1. So let me read their reasons and explain why I would respectfully suggest they may be in error. First, in terms of reasons for rezoning, there's different factors that the Levy Court can consider as part of its rezoning process. So first factor, there was a mistake in the zoning map, or the character of the neighborhood has changed to such an extent that the zoning map should be changed. And the response or the recommendation says the surrounding area is primarily zoned AR and AC with BG zoning along Route 1 and 6 parcels zoned H or IG within a half a mile of the project site. And then they say, they conclude that the rezoning would not be consistent with that, but I think it's the opposite. There is BG zoning along Route 1. You can see it's all red on the east side. It's almost all red on the west side. There are also parcels zoned for industrial. And so these parcels are right there, right along Route 1, and I would submit that we're actually rezoning to make this consistent with those other parcels. I mean, if you want to look to the far east or the far west, where it's all green on that map, sure, there's lots of agricultural ground in the area, but that tells you that none of the property along Route 1 should be zoned commercial, which of course is not the case. So we're looking for consistency along Route 1. That's all we're asking for. There's no reason why a particular property owner, when all of his neighbors along Route 1 have commercial zoning, shouldn't have and enjoy those same benefits. We're only looking to do this for 2 small offices that will support the RV park. So I would submit that we actually do meet the first factor for the rezoning. The second factor says the new zoning classification conforms to the comp plan for Kent County. Well, obviously you adopted a comp plan 2 years ago and it left this parcel zoned the way it is. That in and of itself doesn't defeat this request for a rezoning. In fact, part of what you're doing now with this rezoning is also amending your comp plan. And so I would submit that the comp plan 2 years ago was in error when it didn't fill this gap with commercial zoning also. And so now you're correcting that. It was an oversight. That would be my suggestion on that particular factor. The third factor is transportation facilities, water and sewer systems, storm drainage systems, schools and fire suppression facilities adequate to serve the proposed use are either in existence or programmed for construction. And the response is that the subject site does not fall within the designated master plan area where transportation facilities, et cetera, are either in existence or programmed for construction. But if that's true, then why are all these other properties already zoned commercial and industrial? I mean, again, consistency, to my way of thinking, matters. Consistency matters. And if that big, I'll say, parcel to the north, that big red blob that kind of points down, that's 20 acres. It's already zoned commercial. And that's incidentally where a hotel is being talked about, although no plans have yet been submitted to the county. And that would be a use by right, a hotel there. Here, again, we're just looking for consistency on this little parcel and consistency in the zoning. The last factor says that you're to consider, there is compatibility between the uses of the property as reclassified and the surrounding land uses so as to promote health, safety, welfare of present and future residents of the county. If this commercial property is developed as it appears it may be developed, and if that service road does get put in, it may not get put in, but if it does get put in, then we are making these 2 acres, and it's only 2 acres, consistent with all of that planned development. And that's all we're asking for here. At one point, and I do think this is an error, the planning department's recommendation says there is a substantial inventory of vacant and undeveloped commercial land in the vicinity. Now, that may or may not be true. Supply is in the eye of the beholder. Supply is in the eye, I would submit, of the free market. But whatever one thinks about competition, it is not a relevant factor in the land use process. The question before everyone is whether commercial zoning of these 2 acres is appropriate or not. The fact that there may be other commercial property in the area that's undeveloped, I don't know why that is. Maybe they want too much money. Maybe they're holding out for something more. Don't know, don't care, but the Delaware courts have told us that it held up in Newport back in the early 70s. So this doctrine isn't new. It's been around for a long time. The Board of Adjustment in Newport denied a variance to permit a gas station. And basically they did it because they said, oh, we think we have enough gas stations. And the court said no. The court said, the board worried about economics. It made a finding of fact that there were sufficient stations already in the area. It may be that older gas stations may benefit from the absence of a new modern station in the area, but the public interest is not served. No artificial restriction should deny the property owner the best use of his property. So the point being, and it's been long accepted since then, that competition is not a factor for the county to consider in land use. The question is the use of the land as proposed appropriate, not are there already gas stations in the area, are there already hotels in the area? That's what matters. So I do feel that that particular statement was in error. So I think I've said just about everything I can and beat this horse dead. I'm happy to answer any questions. I welcome the opportunity to answer any questions you folks may have. As I say, I fear there's going to be a lot of irrelevant things said in opposition, and so I would also like the opportunity to respond to whatever opponents may say.
Mr. Angel.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Forreston, a couple of things. Usually DelDOT doesn't put roads in, the developer puts it in, and then the developer, the DelDOT takes it over to their standards and maintains it. So that's why I think I can say why Mr. Party's number one, first question is the way you said it. Yeah, they don't do service roads, you're right. The developer pays for it, but they do it to DelDOT standards and it's maintained. Now, having said that, I've seen the service road that went in when Route 1 went in around Little Heaven. And, you know, those properties there changed and, you know, of course, the cost of the highway went in because they had to put an overpass in to get around from both sides and then make sure people could get in and out. That was an added cost. The question that you were saying about this 2 acres or 1.66 acres for rezoning doesn't matter, should not matter. Well, I'm sorry, but people's rights for property do matter. I read the testimony where he said he went to a lawyer and he paid a lawyer to have it done, but any lawyer that I've ever seen or worked with has always offered or told people to protect yourself, you do a title search. That question right there sets up a red flag in my eyes. I just had a brother-in-law who just bought property out in Pennsylvania, and it was caught last minute. And if he hadn't have done it, he would have been in trouble. So, knowing that this has already been done and hasn't had a title search, that's a red flag on my part. Knowing that somebody else may own that land that's been sold, that wasn't sold to him, and the way I read this is he went to the lawyer and asked for a title to be done, not a title, but the property to be made for a deed. So I don't understand how somebody can take something from somebody else that wasn't his and make it his by paying for it. Now, I know there's rules and regulations.
May I respond briefly, if I may?
Sure.
So first of all, I wasn't involved in that, but my understanding is that, well, two things. First, that 1.6 acres is no longer part of this rezoning request.
Can you speak up, sir? Can you hear you?
I'm sorry. First of all, that 1.6 acres is no longer part of this rezoning request. We pulled that over the questions about title, but I know the attorney that Mr. Martin went to. She is a very reputable, high-quality attorney. So, you know, I don't think anybody's trying to pull a fast one here, with due respect, but this thing was moving. Rather than have it get bogged down in these legal issues, Mr. Martin made the decision to simply drop that portion of the property from the rezoning request. So it's not part of it. That's why I was referring to only 2 acres. And we're proceeding along that way. But I don't believe that the attorney who handled this matter for him did anything sharp or untoward. There are instances from time to time where there are boundary gaps and gores, and they're addressed in different manners, and that's what was done here. So, I mean, as I say, I'm not going to debate that. It's not relevant, I don't think, for this rezoning. You also said something about service roads. Again, my point simply was that there may be a service road associated with some of the projects to the north, there may not be, That doesn't impact this rezoning. That doesn't affect this, whether these 2 acres, which front on Route 1, just like their neighbors to the north, just like their neighbors to the south, should be rezoned. I mean, it's like someone's trying to distract you with something they don't like. Everyone's against this, so deny this, even though if it was just by itself, I think we would all agree, just looking at this, why is there that gap there? Why is there that notch there? So when I was saying that service roads don't matter, DelDOT happens to think they're helpful and they benefit a lot of people, but whether that's true or not, whether that service road ever gets built or not is independent of the question that's before you tonight, which is simply, should we rezone these 2 acres? And it's only 2 acres now, that 1.6 was removed.
To go back to your question, sir, about the lawyer, and I know the lawyer too, and yes, she's very reputable, and I wasn't making any accusations because I know how thorough she is. And I have no idea what the gentleman said when he presented it to her in the first part. I think I read that also in the dialogue here, testimony. So we weren't there when that took place. I'm just saying it raises a red flag. It can't be contiguous when you don't know that land in the center of all this, to pull us all together, how it can be part of a rezoning when that's open in my eyes. I just want to throw it out there.
Well, let's be clear again. This 1.6 acres, if you look at this little green, Greg, can you got your pointer there? The 1.6 acres are those little slivers at the very west of the property. So it doesn't impact at all the frontage or the main 2 parcels that make up the 2 acres. So the 2 acres themselves are contiguous, they're fully contiguous, and they front Route 1, and part of it also fronts Cemetery Road, where Cemetery Road comes into Route 1. So, yeah, so again, I would submit that, it's unfortunate what happened, and if you guys, we asked to table because we wanted to deal with some other issues, responding to the DelDOT letter and getting the word out in the community, but if you'd like us to come back to you with more information about that, I'm happy to do that if that will clear things up for you and your fellow Levy Court members.
I thank you, sir, but your comments about it should not matter or does not matter is what kind of threw me one way too. So, because I think property rights for people do matter. And I think that's one thing Levy Court is here too, to make sure that we do the right thing too. So I'm
a big believer in property rights. You will not find a bigger believer in property rights
we know.
I think, than me. I've written about it extensively, and so yeah, I believe in property rights. Which is part of the reason why I'm here tonight, because I think this particular property owner for these 2 acres should have the same rights as his fellow property owners up and down that section of Route 1.
Mr. Buxton? No. Other questions for the applicant? Appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
All right, well, thank you very much. And as I say, I would like the opportunity, a brief opportunity to respond to things that opponents had to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else here in favor of ordinance LC 20-09? Anyone else here in favor? Anyone on the phone?
If we have any callers who wish to speak on this matter in favor, please press *1 on your phone. Seeing no callers, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Petitbonge. Anyone here in opposition to ordinance LC 20-09? It's good to see you, Mr. Pardee. Let me just make one small request when I have your attention. So, Mr. Pardee, we have had the opportunity to read in detail the amount of material that we received in our offices and the results of the RPC hearing as well. So, and I know that you have done a tremendous amount of work in preparing the application and your position in regard to that, and we appreciate all your time and effort. and out of respect to the people in the audience, as well as to the commissioners, yourself, and anyone else, we would hope that you would keep your comments limited to a short period of time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. For the record, John Pardee, 6 South State Street, Dover, Delaware. And I'm here to speak on behalf of more than 100 residents and property owners in the area, as well as myself. So I would respectfully request that I be given adequate time to present on behalf of all of the people I represent. The clerk of the peace is handing out to you a notebook which is different slightly from the notebook that was presented to the RPC. There are some new materials, and I'll highlight those as we go through the presentation. But if I may, let me start by indicating that in addition to speaking to all of the residents and property owners in the area, which prior to the RPC hearing, apparently no one else had done, I've learned a lot about what the people think about this application. But I also am one of the owners of the Asbury Square Shopping Center project, which is located 2 miles to the north in the town of Frederica. And the reason that that's important is because of the South Frederica master plan. And I would respectfully submit to you that there is a right way to approach land use development and there is a wrong way. We've been working on Asbury Square for 12 years, since 2008. And all along the way, at every step, we have faithfully observed and abided by all of the various codes, ordinances, rules, and regulations governing the development of real property as established by the town of Frederica, Kent County, and the state of Delaware, including DelDOT regulations regarding access to SR1, the state of Delaware strategies for state spending, the Kent County Comprehensive Plan, and Kent County South Frederica Master Plan. In short, Asbury Square has pursued development the right way, and it's simply not fair to allow property owners or developers to pursue the same sort of land use approvals without abiding by the same rules and standards that Asbury Square has honored and observed. Rules and standards which I respectfully submit the application before you has completely flouted and ignored. With your indulgence, my presentation will attempt to explain why. So the first slide you see is a view of SR1 from the Medding property, if this thing will work, to the north. There it is. And moving south, you have the Fry Farm, the Legates Farm, the West Farm, the Hitchens Farm, the Bell Farm, and the Davis Farm. This is zooming in on the subject property. And as you can see, there is a lot of forest land in the area, as well as a blue line stream which runs through the area, and I'll show you that in just a minute. These are the properties that are owned by Ching LLC. And the dates that you see are the dates that Ching LLC acquired each of those properties. The initial property that Ching LLC owns is where the Laser Pro or laser copier business is. Okay, that was acquired in 2008. In 2015, Ching acquired the campground property from Fred Voschel for $249,500. That's a matter of public record. March 3rd, 2016, Ching acquired the 20 acres that were rezoned by this body in 2017. We'll talk about that briefly. Paid $300,000 for that piece. In 2017, Ching LLC acquired these 3 parcels, which are the subject of the application before you. And he purchased those, 2 of them anyway, from Shirey for $184,250. Interestingly, and this came up, and we'll talk about it briefly, the third parcel, tax parcel 67 here, Ching deeded to himself because he didn't know who owned it. And I would submit to you that we don't know today who owns it, but we certainly know that Ching doesn't own it because you can't just deed property to yourself that you don't already own. We'll talk about that briefly. In 2018, Ching acquired this piece, which they're targeting for a water park, and this piece, which they're targeting for a water tower. The total purchases of all those pieces over 2 years and 8 months was $763,590. This is a new slide that the RPC didn't see.
Mr. President, with all due respect to the residents in that area who have a right for this body to make an effective decision, I trust that every single one of us has studied with great intent the information that was presented to us both through the RPC and Mr. Pardee. And I am challenged with spending their time discussing proposals that are not on the application tonight. I would suggest we were to stay focused on the actual rezoning of the actual property that's in front of us tonight. It's not a conditional use, it is in fact a rezoning request. So I would ask Mr. Pardee to recognize that, respect this body, and take the time that you need to articulate that by all means. But I think we need to stay focused with regards to that. Thank you.
Mr.
Thank you,
President, if I may
Mr.
respond to that.
I would certainly agree with Mr. Buxton's comments that we need to stay on the task in front of us for the rezoning.
Mr. President and Mr. Buxton, respectfully, your own code requires an analysis of what's happening in the surrounding area. And I point to section 205408B, which is the legal criteria for rezoning, requires this body to consider what's happening in the area. And it's directly relevant, and I'll explain why.
I think, Mr. President, it's quite insulting for him to come in here and assume that we have not thoroughly reviewed the information presented to us. By all means, continue on. This is not a back and forth that I want, but I do think that it's a bit disingenuous to assume that I didn't pore over this. Fair enough, go ahead.
Well, most of my presentation does in fact deal with these three parcels, including this slide here. But during Mr. Forston's presentation, you may recall, he said, it doesn't matter. And then he spent 15 minutes telling you all about what's happening around the surrounding properties, including a letter from DelDOT that attacks me, which I'd like to explain, by the way, because that letter is wrong, and I'll show you why. But what is going on around this property is absolutely relevant. It's what all of the constituents in this area care about. I will try to keep my comments focused on these three properties and how it relates, but it is directly relevant under your code. So if I may, Mr. President, this is a survey and a deed for one of the three parcels that was presented as part of the application. And it's important for you to understand that Mr. Martin deeded this property from Ching to Ching when he didn't own it. So it can't be considered part of this rezoning. The next slide deals with a rezoning that was presented in 2017. And in 2017, Mr. Martin asked you to rezone this 20-acre parcel because he said he wanted to relocate his business to that parcel. And there are copies of the RPC and Levy Court meeting minutes in your packets in the notebook. At the RPC hearing, Mr. Martin said, or this is Mr. Martin's engineer was speaking, Greg Moore said, we do not have a proposal for a hotel. Mr. Martin has a business in this area which he wishes to maintain here. And then at the Levy Court hearing, Mr. Martin himself said, I'm looking forward to growing my business on this property. That was a ruse. You were duped, respectfully. There was never a plan to move that business to that site. On our information and belief, Ching LLC is actually buying up properties throughout the area in an effort to develop a massive commercial project here. And he has approached many of the people that I've spoken to, the neighbors, in particular, the Legates family, the Hitchens family, and the Bell family, and asked to buy their properties. In 2018, Ching came before the RPC and attempted to zone the same three parcels that they're attempting to rezone tonight, plus the campground for BG. The staff recommended denial, saying the applicant's response to the plus comments appears inadequate and does not address any of the issues that were raised by state agencies. The RPC unanimously recommended denial, and the application was withdrawn before it came to the Levy Court. Undeterred by that setback, the applicant is now pressing forward with efforts to develop all of the parcels he has assembled thus far. And according to paperwork submitted to Plus, the applicant is proposing to develop 7 parcels into a campground, a kids' cottage, a water park, a water tower, a hotel, 4 restaurants, a convenience store and gas station, and 30,000 square feet of retail space. But the infrastructure in the area is grossly inadequate to support all of this intensive development. So the applicant has been working with the various agencies in an effort to generate the missing infrastructure. In particular, working with the town of Frederica to get water to the area, working with the county to get sewer to the area, and working with DelDOT to get access. So I won't spend a lot of time on this, but since Mr. Forston spent some time talking about it and DelDOT's response, I wanted to show it to you. And I want you to look very carefully at what that says in the upper right-hand corner of this map. It says DelDOT. This is a DelDOT map prepared by DelDOT at their instruction, and they paid Century Engineering to prepare it. And I want to submit, for the record, a copy of the email from Tom Felice at DelDOT, who is the director of the Corridor Capacity Preservation Program. He sent me all of these maps on August 5th of 2020. He also sent them to Sarah Kiefer. And the intention is to have these maps incorporated into the South Frederica Master Plan and ultimately into the Kent County Comprehensive Plan. So I'll submit that document for the record. These are not my maps. These are DelDOT's maps, okay? So I respect our Secretary of Transportation very much. And I believe her when she says, and I think she's right, that this service road is not presently running from the interchange south, is not currently a DelDOT approved project. That's correct. It is not identified in their capital transportation program presently, but they are trying to get this approved as part of the county comprehensive plan. And ultimately, if the developers who would benefit from this, which I submit to you are only 2, Medding and Ching, because nobody in between them wants this to happen at all. But if it can't be built by them if they can't get easements. And the only way that the service road can be built if they can't get easements from the property owners is for DelDOT to exercise its condemnation power, which they would have to make this a public project and get funding from the General Assembly. And I submit to you that that is likely to happen. The point is, these are DelDOT's maps. This is DelDOT's proposal, okay? With regard to the Secretary's letter, she's right. They're not currently constructing the service road. And as presently contemplated, it would have to be built by the developers to DelDOT standards and then turned over to DelDOT. And that's because DelDOT currently doesn't have it identified as a project that's funded that they can build. When the Secretary says the improvements are not solely to facilitate the development of the Medding property, the improvements are intended to facilitate the development of many parcels on the west side of SR1, generally located between Tub Mill Pond and Cemetery Road. What's she talking about? She's talking about Ching. There is no other property between the Medding property and the Ching property that would benefit from this or wants it to happen. In fact, everyone is unanimously opposed to it because it will run through their properties. When the Secretary says that I was misspoken when I said, if you have access to SR1 from your property, that access will be closed and you will be required to gain access to the local roadway network via the proposed service road. And she says that's false. Look at the map. If you see, everywhere you see blue on this map, and I submit to you, if you blow it up, you'll see these are the driveways, the houses in front of the Medding property. That's pavement that's going to be eliminated. Everywhere you see blue, the access here will be eliminated. The access here will be eliminated. The access, everything in blue will be eliminated. And in fact, the people in front of the Medding property will have to go out the back of their houses. And Mr. Medding's been circulating a site plan that shows that, with driveways going out their backyards and connecting to the service road. So that is, in fact, the plan. enough about the service road. Let's talk a little bit about Ching's concept plan. And this has been submitted to Plus, okay? This is the campground, shows 35 cabins, 60 RV camper spaces, a pool and splash pad, a bathhouse, a 3-story recreational lodge, a tavern and liquor store, a camp store, related offices, and extensive parking areas. The 20 acres that you rezoned, unfortunately, by mistake, in 2017 is shown to have a kids' cottage, convenience gas store, 4 restaurants, a hotel, 30,000 square feet of retail space, a water park, and a water tower. Mr. Forston says, that doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Ask the people in the area whether they think that matters. The applicant has boasted that this will be a $30 million project similar to Six Flags Great Adventure in New Jersey. And those are articles from the Delaware State News and Delaware News Journal. This is not the right place for a $30 million Wally World. And here's the reason why. And this is going to get to the questions about this particular property. So if you read the Plus comments, Coney Island tells you that this area is out of play, level 3 under state strategies. DelDOT estimates that the project would generate 16,595 new vehicle trips per day. Now granted, that's the entire project, but this is a part of it. DENREC says the project includes parcels which are almost entirely forested with upland forest cover and forested wetlands. Now we're talking about the specific parcels in front of you tonight. The development footprint is sited within areas containing natural features of concern. These include excellent groundwater recharge areas and forested wetlands along a stream and upland forest. There's your mature forest lands in the area. This is looking at the subject property from SR1. And these are photographs inside those properties. You can see all the forest lands. And you can see wetlands. If you look carefully, there's water all throughout here. This forest land is encumbered by significant wetlands. Source water protection section of DENREC says this project is almost completely within an excellent groundwater recharge area, which constitutes a critical area protected by county ordinances, which sets limits to the amount of impervious cover and land use practices that can occur within these areas. And I will remind you that the Kent County Code says that areas of excellent recharge can only be developed up to a limit of 20% impervious surface coverage. DENREC stormwater management says extensive areas of hydric soils are present throughout the subject parcels. DENREC reviewers discourage building on hydric soils because they are an important source of water storage. Basically, if you cover them with impervious surface, you get the water backs up and you get flooding. This is a map showing the excellent recharge areas, and you can see the subject parcels are right here. There's the 20 acres. It's entirely within an excellent recharge area, but you can see it covers quite a bit of territory. There's also a blue line stream running right through this area. This is from DENREC's maps. The Plus review also noted that this parcel, and we're talking about the parcels before you tonight now. The subject parcels contain or abut well-drained prime farmland. The Delaware Department of Agriculture is against the rezoning. They believe the corridor needs to be protected and the proposed use does not fit with the surrounding protected agricultural uses in the area. Here's a look at some of the farms, starting with the Fry Farm right here and the West Farm right here. The Legates Farm. So here's the Legates Farm right here. This is Fry, this is West. Fry Farm is in Ag Lands Preservation. as is the West Farm. Then you have the Hitchens Farm moving farther to the south. Hitchens is this piece right here. And the Bell and Davis parcels, there is Bell and there is Davis. The proposal also conflicts with the nearby Postal's Family Cemetery, which is located right there where you see the red X. And importantly, I think this is something that Mr. Buxton should be very interested in because he campaigned on it when he first got elected. And as I remember the campaign slogan, it was infrastructure before development. Infrastructure before development. And I think he was dead right. I fought that, at least with regard to projects that were already in the pipeline and trying to apply it retroactively. But I think Mr. Buxton was right about that. You should not be rezoning properties, and your code actually says this, unless there's adequate infrastructure in place. I show this because this is where Ching is proposing to put the water tower because they don't have water to this property. There's no water service, there's currently no sewer service, and the roads in the area are totally inadequate. This is Old Cemetery Road. So there is no adequate infrastructure. If you approve this, you're putting development ahead of infrastructure, okay? Exactly what Mr. Buxton said we shouldn't do. Critically, as pointed out in both your staff recommendation and the plus recommendation, this proposal is contrary to your comprehensive plan. The area is not indicated for economic development or additional commercial land development on any of the maps which have the force and effect of law. And importantly, as stated in the plus letter, through the comprehensive planning process, the state and county agreed that development would be concentrated in the South Frederica area to support the turf, and that a master plan would be developed to address environmental and infrastructure issues. This project, this rezoning before you tonight, will negatively impact the viability of the master plan, and as such, it undermines the Kent County Comprehensive Plan and the master plan currently underway. And why is that? Because it's pushing development 2 miles south of the turf. And your own comprehensive plan, your own master plan that you spent so much time and money trying to develop says that should not happen. The development should happen around the turf. This is a critical legal point for the lawyers in the room. Delaware law is clear that any amendment, because as Mr. Forston mentioned, this is not just a rezoning. Because it's inconsistent with the comp plan, they have to amend the comp plan first and then get you to rezone it. The law in Delaware says any amendment to Kent County's comprehensive plan must be consistent with the state's goals, policies, and strategies. I defy you to read the plus letter and find me anywhere a single word or sentence that says that this application is consistent with the state's goals, policies, and strategies. You won't find it because it's not. In conclusion, this area is out of play under state strategies. The properties in question, the parcels in front of you tonight, are riddled with mature forest lands, extensive wetlands, a blue line stream, an excellent recharge area. It conflicts with nearby agricultural activities. It conflicts with the nearby postal cemetery. There's a clear lack of adequate infrastructure. It's contrary to your comp plan. It's contrary to the master plan for South Frederica. It fails to satisfy the criteria for either a comp plan amendment or a rezoning under the county code. And very importantly, the neighbors in the area uniformly, unanimously, not a single one came before the Planning Commission, and I bet you a single one won't come before you tonight that says they're in favor of this. And I point you to tab 19 of our notebook, which has a petition and letters signed by over 100 residents and property owners in the area. And those that are here, I would ask if they would stand up and be recognized briefly. Thank you. I will note for the record that a couple dozen were not able to be here tonight. They tried to come in the door, but because of COVID and the limited seating capacity, they were not able to get here. I understand they were given a slip of paper. They may have decided to call in, but I would note for the record that there were literally at least 2 to 3 dozen people who wanted to be in this room to stand up tonight, and they were denied that opportunity. So with that, Mr. President, I will finally give up and take any questions you may have. Thank you for your extreme patience and indulgence. I appreciate it.
Appreciate your time, Mr. Fardy. Mr. Buxton.
Not a a question, maybe just a statement. Early on in the process, I think I appreciate your effort in expediting the process, not because it's not important. It is. In fact, it's so important that I'm hoping now that there's an opportunity for individuals both on the line or in the crowd. I understand that some of you stood as a show of support. I don't know what the COVID rule is, but I suspect that an individual could come down and present their thoughts. Clearly, we don't want to be redundant, but at the same time, I think it's fair to say that if they have a comment to make, that I deserve to hear it, even if it is negative. I understand that. So my intent early on was in no manner to diminish Mr. Pardee's opportunity to effectively lobby against the rezoning. It was to say, get to it. We have a lot of information in front of us and a lot of folks that want to speak. So I do appreciate your opportunity, or your effort to do so. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Buxton. Any other questions for Mr. Pardee? Seeing none?
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you
Mayor.
very much, sir. So the public hearing is still open. Is there anyone else here in opposition? Anyone else here in opposition? If so, please come down to the podium, give us your name, address, and be sworn or affirmed. Please and thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. My name is Georgianne Schaefer. My husband and I reside at 964 Old Cemetery Road, Milford, Delaware. We're sandwiched in between the cemetery and this parcel.
Ms. Schaefer,
that-
can you be sworn in, please?
I'm sorry?
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
We are sandwiched in between the cemetery and this proposed change. Our house is directly across the road from 20 acres that was changed 3 years ago. And quite frankly, I'm scared silly that this will be approved. I am not looking forward to having a campground behind me or a water park in front of me or a bunch of stores just less than 1/10 of a mile from my house. I have one question for all of you, and especially you, Mr. Buxton, since I'm in your district. Would you like that in your front and backyards? Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your time. Anyone else here in opposition? Come down to the podium, give us your name, address, and be sworn or affirmed. Anyone else here in opposition? Yes, sir. Appreciate you being here. Thank you.
First of all, I'd like to say I'm on the Commission of Planning and Zoning, so if you don't want me to say anything, I won't. But I'm not here to speak for them. I'm here to speak for the agriculture. Is that okay?
Just be sworn or affirmed.
What's that?
State your name and address.
And be sworn or affirmed.
Delbert Mills, 1891 Fork Landing Road, Milford, Delaware.
Mr. Mills, do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, sir?
Yes, I will.
Thank you.
I'd like to bring up the map. If somebody could put the map back up again, where it shows a little bit more of that land right there, where the back part of it. Do you have that picture? Okay, come on down a little further. There was a color one there someplace along. Okay, that'd be close enough. What I'm here to testify about is for the agriculture. All that area around there represents probably 600 acres of land. And I'm speaking because from experience, because I've lived there for 80 years, so now you know how old I am, right? Figured that out. Okay, that land right there that wants to be rezoned if you look at it there, all that land in there is a natural retention pond. It's for all the water that runs from the West Farm, the Fry Farm, the Davis Farm. There's a couple more, I can't think of the name of the Bell Farm. All that water filters into that area. There's never been anybody mentioned in any of this, of what are they going to do if this is rezoned and the character is changed to that property. What are you going to do with all this water that flows down through there? And that area acts like a natural retention pond. It filters the water out before it heads to the Delaware Bay. And nobody has ever mentioned anything about what will they do if we would rezone that property and they'd be able to change the character of it. That's all. Any questions?
Appreciate your time. Thank you very much. Mr. Sweeney.
Mr. Mills, Delbert, before you walk away, over here. So you lived there for 80 years, so you've experienced all the growth with Route 1 and...
What's that again?
You've lived there for 80 years, so you've experienced a lot of growth that was associated with Route 1 coming down and bypassing
There's been a
Frederick.
lot of growth all up and down there, then, but I'm not against the growth that's happening on the right areas. But this is not the area to put any growth in, because it's going to be a deterrent on all the agriculture land in that area.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks again. Appreciate your time. Anyone else here in opposition, come down to the podium, give us your name, address, and be sworn or affirmed. Thank you.
Charles Postles, 2144 Tub Mill Pond Road, Milford.
Mr. Postles, do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, sir?
I do.
Thank you.
First, if I may address the Levy Court on a procedural matter. For my own clarification, the agenda talks about an ordinance LC 20-09. Clearly, the last sentence says 3 contiguous parcels containing 4.55 acres located, and then it gives the tax ID numbers. What was presented by Mr. Forreston was one of those pieces. And so my procedural question is, can we make a change like that just on the fly? The presentation, as I understand it, made by Mr. Forreston doesn't really address the ordinance application as I understand it. If I'm not understanding it, I would appreciate some clarification.
With Ms. Kiefer, maybe she could clear that up for us, or maybe not. Yes, she can. Thank you.
The 3 parcels were certainly part of the original application, but as the applicant mentioned tonight, what they've asked, and they asked before the RPC business meeting, was to remove that 1 parcel where the ownership is in question from the application. Levy Court, and certainly Mr. Eliason can correct me if I'm wrong, but what's traditionally been the case is Levy Court can approve a rezoning application smaller in area than was originally requested. You can't expand it, you can reduce it. So if Levy Court ultimately wanted to approve it, they would simply remove that parcel from the rezoning.
I totally agree with that, by the way.
Pardon me?
I totally agree with that.
Fine.
You can't add parcels, but you can remove them.
Thank you, Mr. Eliason. Yes, sir, go ahead.
So your motion would then not be this ordinance as presented, but it would be just for the 1 parcel of 2 acres.
Sir, it's actually, there are 2 other parcels totaling approximately 2.89.
I understand, but the presentation made, as I understood it, was for just 1 of the 3 parcels that totaled 2 acres.
Yeah, that was not my interpretation.
Okay. I think Could I ask Mr. Forston what his intent was? Would that be appropriate?
It wouldn't be inappropriate, no. You may ask a question.
Mr. Postles, members of the Levy Court, what I meant to say, and if I wasn't clear on this, there were originally 3 parcels. Ownership of or title to the one parcel was questioned, just one, and so that was withdrawn from the rezoning application prior to the RPC business meeting, as Ms. Kiefer said. So there are now 2 parcels that the rezoning is sought for of the original 3.
Okay.
If I did the math wrong, I mean, it's approximately, maybe it's a little more than 2 acres. I tried to do the math in my head, and that's why I was saying 2. If it's 2.4, whatever the number is, it is. But it's just those 2 parcels. The one parcel that was under question was removed from the application prior to the RPC business meeting. So there's now 2 parcels for which the rezoning is sought. And those, if you look at that map, there's kind of like those 2 parcels that look like a little bow tie, kind of on the back end of the 2 bigger parcels. That's what was withdrawn.
Okay. The map that you presented, could I see that map with the arrow that was drawn to what appeared to be the one parcel? Yeah, you have that arrow there and the other one as well, but it was just pointing to that one piece. And so my question was clarification. Is it that one piece or is it both pieces?
I believe this exhibit, which was done by the planning folks, is pointing to, it's meant to point to all 3 because the 4.55 plus or minus acres is for all 3 of those parcels. So as I say, that most westerly piece, the long skinny piece that kind of looks like an elongated bow tie, that piece was removed. So it's just the front 2 pieces, the one that the arrow is pointing to, and then the piece where it says AR to BG, those 2 pieces.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I didn't understand your presentation that way.
Well, I apologize.
Okay. So I guess one further question that I would have then is those front 2 pieces are not contiguous to the back piece, which could potentially be a campground. Am I correct in understanding that from the drawing and the discussion?
Mr. Forson?
I believe, and again, I'm very new to this, so I apologize if I'm saying things that some folks already know, but Mr. Pardee questioned the ownership of that sliver of ground, and so I think what's going to have to happen is there'll be a quiet title action just to confirm title to that. At least that would be my recommendation at this point with the questions being raised. But you're right. Right now there's a gap between most of those 2 parcels and the parcel behind where the RV is.
Okay, thank you. That clarifies that. So let me make a couple comments. I want it understood that I am not against the concept of developing a project that may support the DE turf. I'm a great supporter of DE turf. Let me go on the record as saying that. I think it's done great things, and I appreciate the county's participation in helping to develop that, and I think it can be a tremendous economic driver for Kent County. My objection comes to the location. As has been pointed out, there is wetlands, a tremendous, excellent, highly rated recharge area, of which all 3, or the front 2, however we want to consider them, are included in that area. And I would submit and make an argument that there can really not be development in there of whatever type, whether it was as suggested with a camp store or whether it could be some other things, that wouldn't have a very negative impact on that water recharge and wetland area. Yes, you can do wetland mitigation, and someplace else in the county there could be some wetlands created, but essentially water recharge areas are a very specific, wonderful natural phenomenon. And that water recharge area is very important. That particular branch there, Old Baptist Church branch it's called, is one of the prongs of the headwaters of the Mississippi River. It ends up going to the bay. That recharge area is incredibly important, and I would submit that virtually no development, particularly the kind of development that may be involved in longer-term plans for what Ching LLC and Mr. Martin have, would be devastating to that area. And so I played in that area as a kid. Okay, I know what's there. I grew up on Old Cemetery Road. That is a very valuable resource that I'm pleading to be protected. I could reiterate some of the other arguments that Mr. Pardee mentioned. I'm not going to. I appreciate his presentation, but I wanted to speak to that water recharge particularly because it's incredibly important. The other comment that I will make with the danger of being ruled out of order, but I think it is relevant, is the question of the ownership of that so-called bow tie piece, dogleg piece behind there that has been withdrawn from consideration. The reason that's so important is that is the contiguous piece that will connect what may be the campground or other development that may be done, and the access to whatever would be done in the front parcels. Without that piece, I think it is virtually impossible to connect those. There is no clear contiguous from the front two parcels to the back parcel. My contention is that Mr. Martin and Ching LLC did not rightly acquire that piece, and that may well be why they have withdrawn it from consideration at this point. Let me just make some very personal comments to that point. My great-grandfather was James H. Postles. He died in 1888. Shortly thereafter, that property was devised to my grandfather, Charles Postles. If you will look at some of the maps, it makes a reference to lands reputed now or of late of Charles Postles. That's not me. It's not my father. It was my grandfather. I have looked back prior to this all happening, because I'm just a little bit interested in family history, but certainly looking at it again, there are no outconveyances from the Postals heirs regarding that property at all. Clearly, and maybe more important, there are no outconveyances to Mr. Martin or to Ching LLC. I would contend that there would not be a clear title to that piece. And I would urge the Levy Court to consider the pertinence of deciding on a project of this magnitude, potentially, that may in fact have a very crucial piece that is not contiguous and may have questionable ownership. So for those reasons, I stand opposed to this particular application. Thank you for your time. Any questions?
Appreciate your time. Any questions, Mr. Postles? Seeing none. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Anyone else here in opposition of ordinance LC 20-09. Anyone else here in opposition? Yes, sir. Come on down to the podium, give us your name, address, and be sworn or affirmed, please, and thank you.
My name is Larry Legates. I've been mentioned before. Say again? My name is Larry Legates. L-E-G-A-T-E-S. 2974 Bay Road.
Mr. Legates?
Yes.
You swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, sir?
Whoever said that, yes.
Right here. Thank you.
Got my Chinese mask on here. I'll start by saying a quote from a movie I like. If you give a mouse a cookie, he's going to want a glass of milk. We've had Steve Martin in our home. And yeah, that's all I need to say about that. I'm just going to read a couple paragraphs to shorten the thing up. I probably should put my glasses on. We live at 2974 Bay Road, approximately 1 mile north of the property referenced, and we object to the application for several reasons. Since we are sure you're aware of the rather long list of reasons to oppose the rezoning, paramount importance to us are the issues reflecting the current use of our property as farmland. The farmers we have spoken with are also alarmed at the negative effect this would have on their operations and production losses this would cause. And that would mean income. Also of concern is the proximity to the Milford area, whereas we have noticed that southbound traffic slows while trying to decide which lane to use in the area of the Milford or Beaches split. Development in this area, well, I should say further development in this area would seem to further add to any indecision, possibly compounding the traffic safety concerns. I'm retired from Del Dot, I used to work in safety. I know that this area does not concern the roadway that they're proposing, but it was brought up by the proponent lawyer. And so, in short, it would cut that parcel that I own on west of the highway into 3 pieces. And despite what has been said, I'm pretty sure access to it from Route 1 will be denied, and the big farm equipment that the farmers who farm it would use, they'd have to use, I guess it'll end up being a 2-lane blacktop with giant farm equipment to get to the only place they could get to, the larger portion that would be left. And the 2 smaller pieces that would be left with this road would be pretty much useless for the large equipment. They couldn't even make a turn in one of them, probably both of them. So that's my major objection. The rest of this stuff has already been gone over. Okay, there's one other thing, a couple other things. Old Cemetery Road cannot handle the expected traffic. We expect that Ching will, at a later date, petition the state or county to fund an upgrade. I know this has been gone over before. Water, sewer, and other utilities are currently inadequate. Again, don't be surprised at future demands to have government, meaning the taxpayers, supply these necessities. This is excerpted from a letter that was sent to all of you this week, or last week, I guess it was. No, this week. Anyhow, I'll leave this. I got 2 replies, and just to be sure, there it is for your perusal. I got a lot of other things to say, but that pretty much sums it up. Questions? Thank you.
Appreciate your time. Thank you very much. Anyone else here in opposition of ordinance LC 20-09? Anyone else? Yes, sir. Come on down to the podium and give us your name, address, and be sworn or affirmed. Thank you.
My name's Howard Joseph, 3235 Bay Road, Milford.
Mr.
And-
Joseph, do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, sir?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
I'd like to read a short presentation, then present this as a matter of record. I'm the president of Portable Buildings. In 1998, Portable Buildings bought the old Mohawk Electric property that had sat empty for years. It was upgraded to Kent County specifications and has since manufactured more than 20,000 buildings while hiring dozens of local carpenters, drivers, painters. Our jobs depend on Portable Buildings staying in business. We are asking for you not to approve this rezoning. And I had most all of our employees sign this, and I would like to pass this in. And our concern, if this is approved, is that this will lead to more development down at that end, a road being established, us having to lose our two entrances on Route 1, where about probably 80% of our business comes from that Route 1 corridor. So that's our concern. And any questions?
I got a statement. I'm going to tell you that, Mr. Joseph, you keep one of the neatest, well-organized properties on Route 1. I go by there at least twice a week, and it's always perfect. So do a great job. Thank you.
Do you ever read our sign?
Pardon me?
Every time.
Every.
Thank you.
Anyone else here in opposition to ordinance LC 20-09? Anyone else here in opposition? Mr. Pettibosh?
Mr. President, we have several callers on the line, and we'll ask if at this time they wish to speak by pressing *1 on your phone, and we will recognize you.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a caller. If
William Oliver.
Please state your name for the record, sir.
William Oliver, 797 Cicada Lane.
Mr. Oliver, do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, sir?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
There's been a lot of information shared tonight, so I'll try to keep mine brief. First, I want to thank Mr. Postles for pointing out the 1.66 acres, and when you take it out, the properties are no longer joined to the campground. So then you're putting the demand on infrastructure from people to the campground to get to the offices and all that they plan to build on these two properties. As far as Mr. Parody goes, yes, I am one of the 100 and some residents that he represents. But for the record, he does not represent me out of fear-mongering or any of that. I offer to retain him to fight this for my own beliefs, not his personal gain or nothing else. I'm offended by council saying that the residents are opposed because they're misinformed. No, I'm not misinformed. I'm immediately south to the two properties in question, and the campground is in my backyard. I was glad to see somebody else speak from Old Cemetery Road, because the argument is you want to be rezone this to comply with other properties. Well, when does it stop? Is her house next? I'm going to close by saying the attorney for the rezoning spoke and said it was a no-brainer application. I agree. It is a no-brainer application. You have a 7-0 unanimous vote from the Regional Planning Commission that all had their own minds. They were not swayed by Mr. Parody. They looked at the facts. They voted on the facts. service road, all the other BS withstanding, they voted on the merits of the application. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else?
If we have any other callers who wish to speak, press star 1 on your phone and we'll recognize you. Okay, we're seeing no additional callers wishing to speak. Mr. President.
So one final call for the people in the audience. Is there anyone else here in opposition of ordinance LC 20-09? Anyone else here in opposition? Seeing none? The public hearing is now closed. Mr. Buxton.
Thank you, Mr. President. I've prepared a few comments to make. Yeah, Mr. Forston, we did. That's you're in control of the gavel, although I do recall what you said. So.
Comments in regard to that, we told you that you could, so you can. So I apologize for that.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was sitting off to the side, so I'm sure that you were just anxious to move on. There's been a lot said. I just want to sum up a couple things. As I said at the beginning, 90, if not 95% of what you heard today or tonight was not about these 2 acres. It was about the proposed service road, and that's a bad idea. It may be a bad idea. I'm not here about that. And that's not what I'm here to talk to you about. I'm here to just talk to you about these 2 properties. They front Route 1. There's a notch where they've got commercial to the south, commercial to the north, commercial across Route 1. And so I think, as I said earlier, equity would suggest that they should be treated the same as their neighbors around them. And there's a lot of overgeneralizations that were said. These properties are in level 3. So to the extent someone says level 3 is out of play is a different category. You can rezone level 3, you can develop level 3. Level 3 may be appropriate according to DelDOT, or according to the Office of State Planning. And in fact, a lot of areas are designated level 3 because there may be concerns about the environmental concerns that they just want to flag that people are aware of. So this is not out of play. Only part of the property, not the whole property, is in a recharge area. Being in a recharge area does not preclude development. It imposes additional standards that any development has to meet, and this development, to the extent that these 2 acres are developed, will have to meet those standards or it won't be approved. The slide that was presented said this conflicts with nearby Postles Cemetery. I mean, this doesn't border the cemetery is down the road. I don't see how the rezoning of these 2 acres conflicts with the cemetery. Now, it may be that the overall master plan and some of the other proposed development affects this cemetery, but not this. There was talk about lack of adequate infrastructure and the need for a water tower. Well, that might be necessary for some of the other things that are being proposed, but it doesn't go to the equity of just rezoning these 2 acres. Time and again, people said things that apply to the project, and I understand why they might be upset about that. And I'm not here to question their views. If I lived in a farm, I mean, I am surrounded myself right now by farm fields, so I get that. Just 1 or 2 other quick notes. I talked about the recharge area. I thought that Mr. Legates was very passionate in his speech about agriculture, and I certainly recognize the importance of agriculture to this state, and I've represented the Delaware Farm Bureau in the past, so I get that. But the rezoning of these 2 acres is all we're here for tonight. And so while I understand his concerns more generally and globally about a lot of what else has been discussed, that shouldn't be a factor in your decision for these 2 acres. And I'll just say it one more time. Oh, someone else said that I'm the one who brought up the service road, so therefore, we should all talk about it. I only brought it up because I knew the opposition was going to bring it up. I mean, if it had been up to me, we wouldn't have talked about it at all because, as I've said, I don't think it matters to the rezoning of these 2 acres. These 2 acres should be rezoned regardless of any service road. Someone said they weren't misinformed, and they took offense that I suggested people were misinformed. That wasn't me. I was reading from DelDOT when I said that. So, don't shoot the messenger, as some people will sometimes say. The president of the Portable Buildings Company, I've driven by that site many times as well, and it is a very well-maintained site, is concerned. He doesn't want to lose his access on the Route 1. Again, all I can tell you is what DelDOT has said with respect to that issue. They're not taking away anybody's access to Route 1. They said that pretty clearly in the letter. But regardless, it doesn't go to the merits of this rezoning. So, I think there's been a lot of things said about the overall parcels and this property and that property, and you shouldn't have done a rezoning in 2017 and whatnot. That's not what I'm here about tonight. That's not why you're here tonight. We're just here for these 2 acres, and I would respectfully submit that when you look at the zoning map and you see commercial to the north, commercial to the south, commercial to the east, fronting Route 1, these 2 properties should be rezoned commercial, consistent with their neighbors. And that's all we're here to ask for. I appreciate your taking the time very much. It's always a pleasure to be in Kent County.
Thank you, Mr. Forson. Mr. Buxton.
Okay, Mr. President. Get over here for a second. I know the notes are not that long, even though the paper is. And I appreciate the individuals who made an effort tonight to come out, both the applicant and, of course, those folks, those individuals who stand in opposition. I know it's not an easy thing to do given the times that we're in, and those folks that got turned away, I certainly hope that they can appreciate that it was never our intention to have that occur. So with that said, and I would welcome a conversation with any of the individuals, both for and against, at a later time. I was told something a long time ago. I say a long time ago, during my first term. So this is now my 3rd term. During the first term, they said if you stay in the county seat long enough, at least half, and that might be an exaggeration, half the folks aren't going to like you. They're just not. Why? Because you're going to have to make tough decisions. And it's going to be hard to articulate how that matters to somebody when it's their part of the world that you're impacting. I get that. I 100% get when I make a decision, especially a difficult one. And this one's difficult either way I go, right? I'm fiercely defensive, and I promise to be brief. This is important to me. Fiercely defensive. Look, I don't like ribbon cuttings. I'm not good at galas. You won't see me out with suits hobnobbing with people very often. But I do enjoy working with individuals in my district. And if the impression is that I failed, then I agree to that criticism. I don't have an opportunity. I don't have a defense of it. It is what it is, proof's in the pudding. I can only offer up that it was never my intention. I'm going to move into the decision-making process now. And I find it interesting, ironic, Mr. Pardee and others in the room can appreciate this, that during that first term, the room was filled with individuals represented by Mr. Pardee, in fact, Mr. Forston, who are demanding the rights of property owners, that this body could not implement regulations that would protect the recharge area like you're talking about in a way that effectively does. I could list several others. It's not relevant. You talk about septic or sewer, we could mention that. Roads, we got in a fight big time, and the place was full of individuals, individual property owners, large tract owners, farmers who rightfully demanded that we not diminish their right to sell and their right to a value of their land. And they won, and they were right. Never did I want that to occur, but anything that we were doing, if it was going to do that, it was articulated. So I understand the rights of a property owner. I understand the rights of the property owner who sold their land to Mr. Voschel, who sold it to the Ching application, Mr. Martin. Doesn't make them the enemy. right? I get why you have opposition. It doesn't make me the enemy because I have to make a decision. Now, with all that said, okay, how do we balance this? How do we recognize that the county, Kent, currently, is the lowest of the 3 counties when it comes to the unemployment, I guess I should say the highest. When it comes to wage and wealth and prosperity, we're the lowest. We're underperforming. Now, there's a lot that goes into that, I get it, but what we can control, we should try to control or manage, and that means we have to invite opportunity to come here. Maybe not this application, but we need to invite opportunity to come here and make sense of it when it does. Certainly don't want to vilify it. Let me get to the last point now. Mr. Forston, you were correct. This is not a conditional use. And you were correct that we shouldn't be involved, as Mr. Pardee has said numerous times here, in clouding our judgment with what a state agency will do in the way of, let's say, the environment. But I think what he's incorrect on is, and I've learned, this is not a conditional use of which we're restricted in some of our opportunities. It's a rezoning. And with a rezoning, I've learned over the years that there is leeway. There's great leeway. And I think I've consistently looked at a couple things. Does it fit the area? What's, potential uses for it? Does the RPC support it? Does staff support it? But number one on the list for rezoning has always been the vast majority of individuals in that area, and do they support it? And Mr. Pardee has effectively, through his representation of the individuals in that area, presented enough concerns that I will not stand in favor of this application. And so because of that, I'm prepared to make a motion at this time. My motion is that I recommend denial of ordinance LC 20-03 to amend the comprehensive plan map from low density residential to highway, commercial, and zoning map amendment from AR to BG to include the testimony, to include the recommendation by RPC, to include Exhibit A and B within the application, public comments, and my motion.
Second the motion.
Been regularly moved and seconded. Mr. Buxton, Mr. Pepper, to deny application ordinance LC 20-09. Any questions on the motion? Seeing none, Ms. Tanaka, please call the roll.
Well, Mr. Forson, you mentioned about you need to look at the big picture, and I always try to do that too. But based on testimony I've read, the questions that I've asked and listened to both sides, I'm compelled to uphold the RPC's denial, as well as comments made by the residents, the staff, and the property. It's not located where infrastructure is right now, nor does it conform to our comprehensive plan.
Yes, per my motion.
Yes, per staff and RPC recommendations.
Yes, everything that's been stated so far, plus the area does not currently support proposed zoning change. Changes the character of the area for drainage, natural resources, and agricultural practices. Many types of commercial entities, including those proposed in this overall master plan project, will disrupt many lives. The unanimous decision by regional planning to deny and staff recommendation to deny, and the overwhelming community that came forth in opposition. So, yes, I support the motion.
All due respect to Mr. Forsman's comments about this being only about 2 acres. If I'm driving to San Antonio, I don't concern my plans for only the first 200 miles of the trip. I have to consider the remaining miles of that trip. Levy Court must consider how any proposed changes are going to impact the county for years to come, when some of us may not even be here to protect the county. So for all the reasons previously stated, significant public opposition, significant impact on multiple family farms, Mr. Buxton's and others' comments previously, I support the motion, yes.
Yeah, based on the staff recommendation, RPC's recommendation for denial, my concern about the wetlands, the recharge area, some question about a clear title, infrastructure, it seems to be overwhelming for the area, and as Mr. Forston or someone has said earlier, Mr. Buxton used the phrase, and I did in my campaigns as well, infrastructure before development, I vote no. I'm sorry, I vote yes. I vote yes. That on a system, and then that's what happened. Thank you, Lori. 6 affirmative votes denies ordinance LC 20-09. Thank you all for your attendance. You may stay for the rest of the meeting, or you may leave when you're comfortable doing that. Thank you very much. We appreciate your time and effort, and just the fact you are here under these unfortunate circumstances. Thanks again. We'll take just a couple of minutes till the room clears, and then we'll move on. Thank you. Okay, gentlemen, next item on the agenda, ordinance LC 20-10. Ms. Kiefer.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ordinance LC 20-10 is very simply an amendment to the zoning ordinance that allows daycare centers as a matter of right in the BG zoning district as opposed to as a conditional use. The Regional Planning Commission took testimony at their October 1st hearing, and at their October 8th business meeting voted unanimously to recommend approval. We've certainly seen interest in the industry to expand, and I think the county is trying to make it a little bit easier, and it's a reasonable use in a BG zoning district. Happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions for staff? Mr. Angel.
Sorry, sir, I didn't hear a word you said. Can you please repeat that?
The ordinance allows daycare centers in the BG zoning district by right. That is all. It comes with a recommendation for approval.
I heard that perfect. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Mr. Sweeney.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ms. Kiefer, based on our comments in the discussion in the committee meetings, knowing what we're facing with families who are looking for daycare because of the COVID, because of students who are home most of the time. Appreciate this coming forward in such a quick manner. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Other questions, Mr. Buxton?
Yeah. My bad. All right. So I'm pulling up. She just articulated what it was. I am not asking for a question, so now what? We're calling the public hearing, correct? All right. Trip me up. You're trying to play games on me, I see.
Thank you. We'll now have the floor for public hearing on ordinance LC 20-10, child care facilities. Is there anyone here in favor? Anyone here in favor of ordinance LC 20-10?
If there's anyone that's online that would like to comment on this, please press *1.
Thank you, Mr. Petimage. With that being said, having a public hearing ordinance LC 20-10, child care facilities. Anyone here in favor? Anyone here in favor of ordinance LC 20-10? Anyone here in opposition to ordinance LC 20-10? Anyone here in opposition? Seeing none? The public hearing is now closed. Mr. Buxton.
President, I was contacted by a couple individuals, including yourself and Commissioner Sweeney. While I certainly support the ordinance and played a small role, I'd welcome the opportunity for you two to make the motion and the seconding. Maybe handle it.
Thank you, Mr. Buxton. I'll do so. Move to approve ordinance LC 20-10, child care facilities. An ordinance to amend Kent County Code Volume 2, Chapter 205 zoning as amended by revising Article 13, BG General Business District, subsection 205-169 permitted uses, Article 13 BG General Business subsection 205-170 conditional uses, Article 21 conditional uses, subsection 205-365 table of conditional uses in order to permit child care facilities by right in the BG General Business zoning district.
To approve ordinance LC 20-10. Any questions on that motion? Hearing none? Ms. Tanaka, please call the roll.
Second the motion.
Good. Please call the roll, Lorraine.
Yes, reason stated by Commissioner Sweeney.
Yes, for a reason stated.
Yes, for reasons stated.
Yes, yes, reasons stated, plus it's good legislation.
Yes.
Stated, but I do have a question when you write that record down. Yes. This is still listed under public hearings, and I'm wondering if we should, I mean, it's separated on the sheet, but the head title is still public hearings. Should we have had a public hearing on this? Because I can do that right now. We're good.
Yeah.
Six affirmative votes approves ordinance LC 20-10. I'll now close the public hearings. I'll take my mask off in about 30 minutes. I'll be fine. Our new business, Mr. Angel.
Thank you, Mr. President. Introduction of ordinance LC 20-11, an ordinance to amend Kent County Code, Volume 1, Chapter 86, Strategic Development Fund, as amended for public hearing on Tuesday, November 10th, 2020 at 7 p.m. Introduction of ordinance LC 20-12, an ordinance to amend Kent County Code, Volume 1, Chapter 191, Taxation, Article 6 thereof, Real Estate Tax Exemption for Industries for public hearing on Tuesday, November 10th, 2020 at 7 p.m.
Thank you, Mr. Angel. Mr. Sweeney.
Thank you, Mr. President. Point of order. Should this be an introduction for 3808 and 3809?
Yes.
Okay. Introduction, Resolution 3808, a resolution calling a public hearing upon a proposal to...
I'm sorry, Commissioner Sweeney, the first resolution is a resolution you vote on.
And then the second one's the introduction. Okay.
Yes.
I move to approve Resolution 3808, a resolution calling a public hearing upon a proposal to extend Kent County Sewage Disposal District Number 1, Double Run Area, Walgreens Commercial Complex, Woodside Center.
Second.
Ready to move and seconded. Mr. Sweeney, Mr. Pepper, to approve Resolution 3808. Any questions on that motion? Seeing none, Ms. Tanaka, please call the roll.
Yes.
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 Yes. Thank you, Lori. 6 affirmative votes approves Resolution 3808. Next item.
introduction, the coinciding resolution, introduction of Resolution 3809, Kent County Sewer Disposal District, number 1, proposed sewer extension, Double Run area, Walgreens Commercial Complex, Woodside Center, for public hearing on Tuesday, November 10th, 2020 at 7 p.m.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. And the last item on the agenda tonight is Mr. Buxton, inspections and plan review.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would suspect that there's some discussion to be had, so the proper procedure right now to be entertain that discussion. All right. So if that's correct, is that correct? So then Commissioner, well, whomever.
Yes, Commissioner Buxton, Commissioner Hall asked that this item be pulled off the consent agenda, so it would be appropriate to turn the floor over to him for his reasoning.
Thanks, Commissioner Buxton. So at the when we discussed this in committee, we what we did was we combined the initiative to fund the contract with the funding mechanism, and so I'm going to ask this evening if we could separate the motion to award the contract to First State Inspection Agency of Milford, separate that with a separate motion. I have a motion here prepared to address the funding mechanism separately.
Excuse me, Mr. President.
Mr. Angel.
Thank you. Mr. Hall, can you read that last two sentences? You got muffled when you turned your head down, so.
Sure, sorry about that. So I was just recommending that we separate the motion to award the contract to First State Inspection Agency of Milford, and then a separate motion to address the funding mechanism. I have a draft motion here prepared to make to vote on that separately.
So, yeah, motion prepared.
Any discussion?
Mr. Sweeney.
Thank you, Mr. President. I agree with Commissioner Hall's suggestion only because I'm not interested in defunding a position that planning obviously so desperately needs, but I am willing to forego looking at filling that position for up to 6 months to determine the impact that the contract as it's approved would have on the backlog of permits that have accrued since the beginning of the COVID pandemic.
Mr. Angel.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to be clear. Are we talking about funding this position or giving it to another agency in addition to?
What we talked about in committee was issuing the contract as a stopgap measure. And so at the time, what we approved out of committee, and I'm asking to readdress, is what we approved out of committee was to award the contract to this particular company and use the funding for the position as the funding mechanism to pay for this. So essentially, we could not continue the process of hiring someone to fill the position which is creating the gap for which we need the stopgap. So what I'm recommending is that we have two motions, 2 votes. First vote is to award the contract as we already discussed, and I believe it was unanimous, that we would award the contract to First State Inspection Agency as a clean motion and a clean vote. Then separately, we vote on whether we take it out of unrestricted reserves to fund that contract, or we use the funding that we have that's tied to that position, and therefore we can't hire. So I think that answers the question.
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Buxton.
So a couple things. And what was the purpose of sending the child care motion it's just symbolic, right? But it was symbolic of the, even though I'm the chair, you were willing to share a good idea, and I certainly didn't deserve the credit, but the fact that you shared it with me was important to me, so I appreciated that. And this, in fact, may or may not be a good idea. I just would have liked to have had it shared with me. Having said that, I don't support the move, even though I don't think that it's a horrible idea, what you're proposing. And I'll articulate why. Number one, I think this is a very, very good deal that we're doing, right? As a commissioner, as best I can see, right? I don't work in there every day, but I have taken the time to meet with departments, most of the department of the representatives more than once, all right? And we have all dealt with the backlog. I didn't say backlog caused by this person or this person. I said backlog because it is existing. And this is a move that will help, if it's utilized properly, will have a significant impact. There is no reason to believe that it won't. It's done in other jurisdictions. We've effectively done it ourselves. And I believe that it should be a permanent move. If it's going to be permanent, let's figure out a way to pay for it. So if it replaces an employee, let's pay for it by utilizing that spot. Let's not take the money from savings every year. Let's pay for it with that spot. So you're effectively, even though it's small spending, it's still spending. So that's why I liken the idea. It can be temporary. We can revisit this down the road, right? And I'll end with this one. And I'm not the only one, I think. Once we look at it, it's my belief that in the pay study, we're going to see, especially in that department and in that section, that we have some folks that are underpaid. And every dollar saved is an opportunity to pay them more, rightfully so. So that's it. That's it. I said my piece. You've allowed me the opportunity. I'll support either motion, but my position is that we stay the course. All right?
Thank you, Mr. Buxton. Mr. Pepper, you weren't here for the original conversation. Do you have any questions or concerns about that?
No, I caught myself up on the issue. Thank you.
Sorry?
I caught myself up on the issue. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Mr. Buxton, what's your pleasure specifically on this issue? To retain what was happened and what was sustained previously, or?
I would assume following the procedure, right? I make a motion that we approve it as presented on the consent agenda, and then, of course, if it doesn't get approved, then I guess it would flip back to Mr. Hall, correct? Is that how, Mr. Pettit-Damage, is that how we're looking to do this? Makes sense?
On the item that was in the consent agenda on the back page, there's a motion. So because it's now moved into business, it would be appropriate to make a motion, if that's the motion you choose. If there's a second, then there's an opportunity for an amending motion, and that could get voted on separately, and then you go back to the main motion. Greg?
I agree.
So I recommend a motion that we move to award a contract for construction plan review and building inspection services to First State Inspection Agency of Milford, Delaware, with said contract party to be compensated on a fee-for-service basis at an hourly rate of $90, with initial contract expiration date of June 30th, 2021, in which said contract may be extended on an annual basis for up to 2 additional fiscal years upon the mutual consent of the vendor and the county, with the first year funding for said contract to be derived from the Division of Inspections and Enforcement salary and benefits allocation within the FY 2021 budget, with total first year contract expenditure not to exceed $55,000. And I further move to authorize the direct the President of Levy Court to execute said contract on behalf of Levy Court.
On the motion.
Ready to move to the second, Mr. Buxton, Mr. Angel. Any questions on Mr. Sweeney?
Thank you. So, Mr. Buxton, that's your original motion that went along with the consent agenda, which then defunds the position in planning of $55,000. Okay, thanks.
Any further questions on Mr. Hall?
Mr. President, would this be the appropriate time to make a separate motion?
An amending
Amendment?
motion? Yeah.
Amendment.
All right. I move to amend the awarding of the contract for construction plan review and building inspection services to First State Inspection Agency of Milford, Delaware, with said contractor party to be compensated on a fee-for-service basis at an hourly rate of $90 an hour, with an initial contract expiration date of June 30th, 2021, and which said contract may be extended on an annual basis for up to 2 additional fiscal years upon the mutual consent of vendor and county, with the first year funding for said contract to be derived from unrestricted fund-based balance within the fiscal year 2021 budget, with a total first-year contract expenditure not to exceed $55,000. And further move to authorize and direct the President of Levy Court to execute said contract on behalf of Levy Court and the existing building inspector position and planning services shall be filled post haste.
So I completely agree with Mr. Buxton's comments that we do need the,
Before you have comment on that, there needs to be a second.
that's part of my second of the
Okay,
motion.
I'm sorry.
And I agree with Mr. Buxton's comments that we do need this for the planning department. And I agree with Mr. Hall's comments about the funding out of unrestricted funds. So I second the motion.
So any further questions on that? We have a motion, and then we have an amendment to the motion. So we'll do the motion first.
Amendment first.
Sorry, the amendment first?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Larson. So on the amendment first, and you all heard what that was. So, Mr. Tanaka, you call the roll on the amendment.
No. No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
No. Those votes, as you have heard, defeats the amendment. Now we'll have the motion.
Yes.
Based on my comments, and I want to articulate for 12 seconds that the staff is want to identify we have these ups and downs. And if we can utilize this effectively, we can help to manage those ups and downs when they get inundated with no control over that. So, but my vote's yes.
No.
Yes.
Having attempted to fund this through a different manner, didn't pass, but I still think it's the right thing to do, so my vote's yes.
Yes. Sorry, 5 of 30 votes approves the motion made by Mr. Buxton. Other business, we have an executive session on November the 10th. Mr. Pepper.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to go into executive session immediately following the committee meetings of November 10th, 2020 for preliminary discussion on site acquisition for a publicly funded capital improvement, legal strategy session regarding collective bargaining or pending or potential litigation, and personnel matters pursuant to 29 Delaware Code 10,004 B2, 4, and 9.
Second motion.
Moved and seconded. Mr. Pepper and Mr. Sweeney go to executive session November 10, 2020. Any questions on that motion? Hearing none, Mr. Tanaka, please call the roll.
Yes.
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 Yes. Thank you, Lori. 6 affirmative votes moves us to the executive session on November 10, 2020. Informational items. Mr. Pedamash? No. Any commissioner? Mr. Angel?
Thank you, Mr. President. Last Thursday, Commissioner Sweeney, myself, and Ms. Masson were in the League of Women Voters Ms. Wooten also for her position too. And we had probably one of the best debates I've ever seen or ever been part of. It was very well attended as far as virtually, and it was actually put out there. So please you get a chance to listen to the voters, us get our voters' attentions on our views. I thought it was excellent, as well as it was brought up by Ms. Maston at that time that, you know, Mr. Brothers is in the audience here. If you're going to be interested in this position, you need to come and do your homework. You need to be here, because a lot of the things that couldn't have been answered by the questions that were asked unless you come here. You have to be well informed. So I just wanted to put that out there, that I really appreciate the candidates still coming, and please vote and do the right thing. That's all I can ask. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Angel. Mr. Sweeney.
I'll wait till commissioner comments, sir. I'll wait till commissioner comments.
Any other informational items? Mr. Pedimage, nothing?
No, sir.
No, okay. Any public comments? Public comments? Seeing none? Any commissioner comments? Mr. Sweeney.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I want to agree with Commissioner Angel. It was nice to have a debate where it was only levy court issues. We didn't have to sit through any state mess or asking them about their budget and sitting there twiddling our thumbs like we didn't know what was going on. But it was nice having a debate that was only levy court. That was very nice. So I do have a couple of items to share. On Saturday, we had the Kent County Fantasy Trail at the Ackridge Reservation, but also around our levy court gymnasium, the Kent County Recreational Facility. Mr. Shepard, and like I said, Caitlin Scheck and Mr. Rigby and all of the crew from Parks and Rec did a great job of setting that up. And I think we had almost 300 cars go through. I do know that they had a little over $4,000 worth of candy that weighed, I don't know, Jeremy told me that a van full. I just couldn't believe it. And I did pay the money and go through the trail. I got 2 bags of candy, one for myself and then one for the Delta crew that was there working. Last week, I did not get the opportunity to talk about the 4-H Achievement Banquet that I went to. It was a virtual affair. Our 2 recipients were Lake Vasey and Rachel Taylor, who Commissioner Pepper will tell you, we've watched these kids come up from little tiny 7-year-old clovers to where they are now the leaders in the 4-H for Kent County. Lake has been invited to Kent County on November 17th to make her presentation that she missed in the spring for EpiPens in schools and some funding from Levy Court. And I'm going to invite Rachel Taylor for the same night. And even though it is not a business meeting, I would like to make the presentations of the tributes to both Rachel Taylor and Lake Vasey on that night if we could. Tonight, I was able to attend the Delmarva Council of Boy Scouts Kent Distinguished Citizen event. It was another virtual affair. Recognized was Dr. Wilma Michaud as the Kent County Distinguished Distinguished Citizen of the Kent County. It was over in about an hour and 15 minutes, and it was an excellent affair. She was very well received. All of the comments that came along after the presentation. We did not have our tribute ready for that event, so my comments to Dr. Michaud was to bring her to our chambers at an upcoming business meeting and present a Kent County tribute to Dr. Michaud for her being recognized as the Kent County Distinguished Citizen. Finally, Mr. Pedimage is working with Laura Page from the Brandywine Valley SPCA to bring about another pet food bank on December 5th. So you'll hear about it a couple times between now and then. But if you want to come and see what people do when they need pet food, we've seen it with human food a lot. And I've seen a couple with pet food. Plan on coming out on December 5th. It'll be a cold day. Hopefully a lot of people will be there trying to take care of their pets. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Any other commissioner comments? Mr. Angel.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. As you all know, I was awarded that scholarship for the National Association of Counties for the National Leadership Academy under Colin Powell. I'm in my 5th week, and oh my gosh, the things I have learned, you can teach an old dog new tricks, I can tell you that right now. And it's amazing, and I would hope that we would get some of our staff involved in it, because we have Parks and Recs, and we have administrators, we have other commissioners that are taking this course, and it is well worth the effort for leadership. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Angel. Mr. Buxton? Yes, sir. You all right?
Told to say something, so I hope you'll join me in voting Trump 2020 and next Tuesday.
Don't hold your breath. With that being said, entertain a motion to adjourn.
Is 2020 his running mate?
So moved, Mr. President.
Second.
Regularly moved and seconded, Mr. Angel, Mr. Holt, that this meeting be adjourned. Any questions on that motion? Hearing none? Lorraine Tanaka, please call the roll.
Yes.
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 Yes. Yes.
Yes. Thank you, Lori. 6 affirmative votes. We are adjourned.
Conference recording has stopped.